Okay, let's talk about the housing market because right now it is sending some seriously mixed signals. I mean, on one hand, you see all these headlines about new home sales being super strong, but then at the same exact time, new construction seems to have totally stalled out. That that just doesn't add up. So today we're going to dig in and solve this little mystery. And this is the real head scratcher, right? Why are new home sales so high when construction is completely stalled? You think strong sales would mean builders are putting up houses like crazy, but that's not what's happening. To figure out why, we've got to look a little closer at what the headlines are screaming versus what the data is quietly telling us. So, look at this. On the left, you've got the story everyone's hearing. New home sales are at multi-year highs. That sounds fantastic, like a boom is underway. But then you look at the actual data, the housing permits, which are basically the green light for builders to start a project, and it tells a completely different story. They're stuck at levels we usually only see during a recession. This is the contradiction we're going to get to the bottom of. All right, let's start with our first clue here. Those really strong sales numbers, are they as good as they sound? Now, this is the number that's been grabbing all the headlines, $745,000. That's the annual rate of new homes getting sold. And yeah, on the surface, that looks incredibly healthy. But wait a minute. With mortgage rates being so high for the average person, how in the world are builders pulling off these kinds of sales? Well, they have a secret weapon, and it's called a rate buy-down. Here's how it works. The builder gives the buyer a credit, but instead of knocking it off the price of the house, that credit is used to lower the buyer's mortgage interest rate. It's a really clever way to make a pricey home feel a lot more affordable, especially when the market rates are through the roof. So here's the real story behind those flashy numbers. If you just for a second ignore that totally wild, once-in-a-lifetime housing spike we saw during the pandemic, you'll see the truth. The long-term trend for new home sales, it's been pretty much flat for the last 10 years. These rate buy-downs aren't creating some new boom. They're just keeping the market afloat. Okay, that brings us to our second clue. If builders have this trick up their sleeve to keep sales chugging along, why aren't they building more houses? What's stopping them from meeting this demand they're creating? And yup, the housing permit data confirms they're holding back. There is simply no growth. The number of new projects getting a green light is stubbornly low and completely flat. This isn't an accident. Builders are making an active choice not to build more. And that's the other half of our mystery. We've established that they can sell the homes. They have the tools, they have the incentives. So the real question becomes, why won't they build more? Clearly, they're not looking at the monthly sales reports like the rest of us. They're watching something else entirely. And that leads us right to the big reveal. As it turns out, home builders live and die by a kind of golden rule. It's all guided by one very specific number that tells them exactly what to do. So what is this all-important metric? It's not sales figures, it's not what the Fed is doing with rates, it's not even consumer confidence. So what is the one number that tells them when it's time to build and, probably more importantly, when it's time to stop? This quote really nails their whole mindset. You have to remember, builders aren't a charity, they're businesses, and many of them got absolutely crushed in past housing busts. So their number one goal, above all else, is to never, ever get stuck with a bunch of completed, unsold houses on their books. And here it is, $120,000. That is the magic number. And we're not talking about any old inventory. This is the number of completed, brand new, ready-to-move-in homes for sale. This is the inventory that represents the single biggest financial risk to a builder. And if you look at the historical data, it couldn't be clearer. Anytime the national supply of these completed, unsold new homes starts to creep above that 120,000 line, builders slam on the brakes. They stop starting new projects until that number comes back down. It's their internal safety valve to prevent disaster. So, now that we know about this golden rule, the whole puzzle just clicks into place, doesn't it? The market isn't booming and it's not crashing. It's just stuck. Stuck in this weird, delicate balance that the builders are managing themselves. So let's put the two pieces together. First, builders use those rate buy-downs to keep sales moving just enough to turn a profit. But at the same time, they use that 120,000 inventory number as a hard ceiling on how many new homes they'll build. You put those two forces together, and what do you get? A surprisingly stable market. And that's really the big takeaway here. What we're seeing isn't just random market noise. It's a very deliberate strategy. The builders are in the driver's seat, using incentives to manage the demand side, and their 120K rule to manage the supply side. They've basically created their own little stable ecosystem. So we've figured out the why behind what's happening in the housing market today. But solving that mystery just opens up an even bigger question. This carefully controlled balance, how long can it actually last? At some point, something's got to give. So the mystery isn't what's happening now, it's what happens next.